Freedom Gundam makes its way to the card game in the very first set, with the deck being called Freedom Blockers. As the name suggests, the whole idea is establish as many blockers on the board as possible to defend yourself from your opponent's attacks. The game plan is to go for the grind game and outlast your opponents with resources and have multiple units on the board eventually so that you can beat them down against their shields in order to win. This is exceptionally good against aggro matchups that have really powerful early game potential, which is really good at slowing them down entirely and hard countering them as well. The deck is composed with the colors of white and blue, very similar to the Unicorn deck profile, which I covered on the channel as well, but with a completely different playstyle, as you're mainly focusing on defensive blockers as well as heavy board control, with Freedom being one of your main bosses. Like I mentioned, the white cards of your deck are mainly going to be your blockers, including your Strike Gundam, and the blue cards are there to supplement with your attacks to either take down your opponent's units or go for their base and shields with the original Gundam RX-78, as well as a mini unicorn package, which is also included. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about the build. Starting with the level 2s, I'm running 3 copies of Zawarts, which is the early game blocker that you want to bring out as soon as possible. With its 3/2 stats, it's really good at trading against your opponent's attacks, but keep in mind you cannot attack your opponent's shields or base with this unit, but you are allowed to attack into your opponent's units if you ever want to do so instead. As we move on to level 3s, I'm playing 4 copies of Gundam Lefrith, which is currently one of the best early game blockers to bring out with 2/4 stats. With its 4 health, oftentimes it can give you at least 2 blocks in the early stages to slow down any of your opponent's rush strategies, especially if they try to attack your bases with smaller units. It is fantastic at slowing down the early game tempo to ensure that you can scale strongly into the late game stages. As for the other level 3 unit, I'm running 3 copies of Rizal with its 4/3 stats, which is relatively good at trading against higher level units or directly taking out the enemy's EX base alone. For level 4s, I'm running 4 copies of the OG Gundam RX-78, which ideally in the level 4 play, I want to link it together with Amuro to rest down one of the opponent's units and attack over it. And even if it takes damage, it has repair 2, so at the end of turn, it can heal 2 damage off of it, which is incredibly great value. Aside from that, as long as this unit is paired during your turn, all of your units, including itself, gain an additional AP. And if you were linking it with Amuro Ray together, this can easily bring Gundam up to 6 AP, which you can easily take down many units on the board on your opponent's side, especially when it comes down to most link units, or even outright take out a base with 6 HP as well. As for the secondary level 4 unit, I'm running 2 copies of Sword Strike Gundam, which is intended to link together with Kira so that we can gain his link effect as we attack to bounce the opponent's 2 HP or less units back to their hand. With the additional removal, we can slow down the opponent's aggressive tempo, especially when it comes down to removing their smaller level units over and over again. Level 5s, I'm running 4 copies of AL Strike Gundam, which is the main blocker that I'm trying to bring out in the mid stages of the game. When you pair a level 4 or higher pilot with it, you get to bounce one of the opponent's 4 HP or less units back to their hand. But keep in mind, this effect is mandatory, so you want to be careful when you're using it so that you don't accidentally bounce something that might give your opponent value in return, especially if they have a link unit on the board like that. Otherwise, it's generally really good to bounce off the opponent's blockers to go for a lethal swing, or you can trade into the opponent's units alongside when linking with Kira to give the opponent's units -2 AP, as you can ensure your AO Strike survives the battles as you take them down. Next, I also include 2 copies of Perfect Strike Gundam, which has the same stats as AO Strike, but costs 1 less resource to play out during the level 5 turn, and you also get to bounce a unit with 1 HP or less back to your opponent's hand, and this is exceptionally good when you remove the opponent's tokens with 1 HP. And then to wrap up for the rest of level 5s, I'm running 1 copy of Unicorn Gundam, Unicorn Mode, and of course that is the intention to link together with Benager, as well as go for the Unicorn Destroy mode play later on. And this is where we talk about level 7s, but let's start off with the main boss units that we're trying to play in this deck, which is the 3 copies of Freedom Gundam. Itself is a big beefy blocker with 4/6 stats, and the main idea is to pair it together with a pilot so that it can further reduce your opponent's units AP by 2 for an entire turn to get even more value trades off of it in order to control the board. This works exceptionally well when you link it together with Kira, and you get to repeat this effect turn after turn every once when you pair another pilot with an another white unit that you have. And for the secondary level 7, which I mentioned earlier, I'm running 3 copies of the Unicorn Gundam Destroy mode, which is intended for the later gameplays to go for offensive attacks, which we can also synergize and combo together with Unicorn mode as we destroy it and then bring it out for free if we want to. Otherwise, we just want to link it together with Banagher in the later stages, and then we get to attack and rest anything, which is exceptionally good at resting their blockers as we go for the lethal attacks, or resting another unit so that our other big unit can take it down afterwards as well. That's it for all of our units. Now let's talk about pilots, starting off with the 4 copies of Kira, which is the main pilot of the deck, just because we play a lot of Strike Gundams and Freedom Gundams, which we want to try to link it together as much as possible so that we can attack the same turn we play them out. Like I mentioned before, Kira is fantastic at reducing the opponent's AP to ensure that your units survive the battles as you take down your opponents. And then for the secondary pilot, I'm running 4 copies of Amuro Ray, which is mainly intended to link together with Gundam RX-78. But other than that, we can always use him to rest down any of our opponent's units with 5 HP or less just by pairing it with any unit so that we can instantly trade or go for lethal attacks to suspend blockers if we ever want to. And then for the third pilot, I'm running 3 copies of Banagher Lynx, being one of the best pilots currently, giving the raw stats of both 2 AP and 2 HP. And as long as we're linking together with Unicorn as much as possible, we also get to draw a card to keep our hand size as healthy as possible. But also, aside from just linking it together with Unicorn, simply just by pairing it together with Freedom or AO Strike, we can make it even stronger with more AP and even more HP, which makes it even more difficult for the opponents to take down our big blockers. That's it for pilots. Now let's talk about command cards, since this is a white and blue deck after all, so we're going to take advantage and run the best staple card options currently in the game, which I'm having 3 copies of Overflowing Affection and 3 copies of Show of Resolve in order to help us draw cards and make sure that we have cards to play in our hand so that we can outlast the opponents when it comes to the resource game. And then to wrap up for the rest of the deck profile with our base cards, I'm running 4 copies of Archangel, simply because we play a lot of blocker units in this deck, and this is where it gives us the confidence to attack with our blockers of our own, because Archangel can restand them and turn them back to active so that we can defend the attacks against the opponents in the following turn, or also make it more difficult for them to try to remove our blockers since they're standing up again. Tech choices and other cards that you guys can also consider adding into this deck, such as some battle traps, including Unforeseen Incident, as well as Naval Bombardment. Generally doing the same thing, where Unforeseen can reduce the opponent's AP to lessen the amount of attacks or damage that they might deal to your units. And for Naval Bombardment, having the exact same burst effect as Unforeseen Incident. Instead, you can also proactively use this card from your hand during the action step to buff up your blockers with additional AP, which is exceptionally good to take down bigger bodies, especially when it comes to the Wing Zero match up alongside with your Freedom and Kira to reduce their AP so that you can go for value trades. Aside from Archangel, you guys can also include additional base cards that can help play out units such as Corsica Base or even White Base. And Striker Pack can also give you blocker tokens, which has the versatility of letting you choose to go for a Sword Strike with 4/2 stats or a Launcher Strike with 2/4 stats, which is essentially another additional copy of Gundam Lefrith. And if this card was ever hit in the shields, you get the burst effect to play out a AO Strike with 3/3 stats instead. Just because this deck is really heavy on the control side, there are times that I wish I have a little bit more of damage output to help me close games a little bit faster. And one of the spicy techs that I've actually tried out and considered is actually Tallgeese Gundam along with Zex, and by linking them together, you'll have a unit with 6 AP, which has many applications as it can unsuspend and make 2 attacks per turn. One is to either take down a 6 health base or take down the opponent's units so that you can draw a card. Otherwise, after the first attack, you want to restand it by expending 4 resources so that it makes it difficult for your opponents to attack into it in the following turn. And then in the following turn, that is where you can then consider going for the double attacks to either go for lethal or push for even higher value plays. Combos and how to play the Freedom Blockers deck. Let's begin talking about how you want to go first or second. Generally in this current format and meta, going second is just way more prevalent, and because of best of 1 situations, you don't know what your matchups are specifically. So that is because you can gain the extra resource, which can help you curve way better in the beginning. But let's just assume sometimes you don't really get to choose. So here we have the example of the mulligan hand that you want to go for. You want to see your Zords and Gundam Lefrith so that you can play them out as soon as possible as your defensive units to prevent your opponents from attacking into you. Since this is a white and blue deck after all, Overflowing and Show of Resolve is always great to help you draw and cycle through cards. And they want to go for your level 4 plays, which is a little bit of aggression, and then level 5s for even more control. Eventually, when you go into your top end with Freedom, you have gigantic blockers on the board to stop stop any of your opponent's attacks from penetrating into your shields or base. So to begin at level 2, whenever you can, just immediately play out your Zawart right there. Otherwise, at your level 3, this is where you want to start playing out your Love Rift, and if you have an extra resource there to use to finish off the turn, always use Overflowing Affection to help you cycle cards if you ever need to. By establishing these blockers, this is where you want to think of trading against your opponent's units. Since the war has 3 AP, it has pretty decent damage to trade against some bigger bodies that your opponents may have. Love Rift with 4 health can help protect you with multiple attacks, especially against lower AP units in the early stages with aggro rush decks. So you want to think and try and choose how you want to block your Love Rift, ensuring that it can survive 1 hit, and then otherwise forcing your opponents to trade into it, or otherwise the next turn you can restand it and have another blocker ready to go. Level 4 is where you can switch up to the offensive side of the gear a little bit more, or also try to control the board. This is where you want to go for the Gundam and Amuro link play, so that you can play out Gundam first and then link Amuro together. Since you link there and pair with Amuro, you get to rest down one of your opponent's 5 HP or less unit. Ideally, it's going to be something bigger and important that you want to take down. This is where you want to prioritize on taking down that unit as you gain additional AP, so that your Gundam right here is at least 6 attack with 5 HP. You want to make sure you survive the attack, and even let's just say you take 2 damage. That way at the end of the turn, you get to repair 2 so that you take in no health and you still have a healthy link body on the board ready to go next turn, forcing your opponents to respond to it. And now this is where we roll for the level 5 curve play with your cards as you go into your AO Strike or Perfect Strike. Ideally, it's going to be your AO Strike first. If not, you have Perfect Strike as your secondary option choice. So let's play the 4 resources to play it out. And then for 1, we're going to link it together with Kira Yamato right here. You generally only want to link with Kira Yamato if you have the intention to make the same attack that same turn in order to utilize its link effect. Otherwise, if there's nothing to attack, then really I wouldn't link the Kira Yamato, because if your opponent has a body, this is where you want to consider trading into it and also using Kira Yamato's effect to -2 AP to ensure your AO Strike can sustain the damage and still retain on the board, so that you have a link unit that forces your opponents to address into it. Otherwise, if your opponent has a base with 5 or 6 health, this is something I can immediately attack into as well. Or on the flip side, if you anticipate your opponent playing a big unit out and you really need the additional snap buffs, that is the only situations where I would link Kira Yamato and not attack the same turn. That way I'm intending to trade against that body as I block the attack during their turn. Otherwise, if you don't have AO Strike, you can achieve exactly the same thing with Perfect Strike as well. But instead of bouncing a unit that your opponent has with 4 or less HP with AO Strike, Perfect Strike will bounce a 1 HP or less instead as soon as it's deployed. And then from there, you have the same options, whether you want to attack into your opponent's units to go for favorable trades or value trades, or go into their base, whatever you prefer. Or otherwise, stay as a blocker so that you can stop the opponent's attacks in the following turn. As we move on to the level 7 link plays, this is where you can start establishing your Freedom Gundam. This is where you can play it out for 5 cost, which you want to also make sure to pair it with a pilot or link it with Kira so that you can multiple times reduce the AP of the opponents by 2 off of Freedom Gundam, and another 2 with Kira as you intend to attack into it to once again give you value trades as you take as little damage as possible with Freedom Gundam. Otherwise, the alternative play is if you want to go for aggression attacks, this is where you can go for Unicorn by paying 6, and then for 1, you link with Benager to draw a card, and then you can immediately start attacking and also resting your opponent's blockers if you ever need to instead. Another powerful level 7 play that you can execute is alongside with Archangel. Although this card can be used out anytime when as soon as you hit level 3, this is to help you set your blockers active once again so that you can make attacks and then restand to defend against your opponents within the following turn. But here we're going to show how you can utilize it at the specific level 7, where we're going to use Archangel first by paying 1 resource. We get to grab a shield from our hand, and then we get to cycle through a card and see on how we want to expand on our plays. But since we only have 6 resources left, this is exactly where we want to use Perfect Strike for 3, bounce the opponent's unit if we have, and then use 1 so that we can link Kira together so that I can immediately attack that same turn. Whether we want to trade in the opponent's unit or go for security base, whatever it is, we can reduce the AP of the opponent's units by 2 as well. After doing so, this is where we want to save the 2 resources to use Archangel's effect to rest the 2 resources so that we can set our blocker as active once again. If we are ever at level 8 instead, this is where you can go for AO Strike instead of Perfect Strike, but Perfect Strike plus all this combination of cards is the faster way to get into this combo. And ever since then, you want to start making sure your Archangel is defended, because when you have your later game blockers together with AO Strike and Freedom Gundam, this is where you can really go for nasty combos as you keep attacking again, and you can always restand 1 blocker once per turn so that you're also having the aggression that you need to help finish games off. Another tip when it comes to playing Freedom Gundam, you don't always necessarily need to link it with Kira Yamato just because you want to have it as a big blocker. You can always simply just pair it with Menager Lynx or even Armor Array depending on the situation that you need, because as long as it's paired and once per turn when you pair a pilot with any of your white units, you still get to -2 AP to it. Therefore, you want to save the Kira for any of the link plays where you go for AO Strike or Perfect Strike, or even possibly Sword Strike if you ever have it, so that it can also further reduce the 2 AP with Freedom, and then as you attack, and then Kira also gets to minus another 2 AP, achieving the same goal. The nice thing with Menager Lynx is because it gives you raw 2/2 stats, it makes your Freedom Gundam even beefier than normal with at least 6 attack and 8 HP on the board, which is very difficult for your opponents to remove. So once you establish a board of blockers like this, you control the board and scale it into the late game stages, and then that's when you can continue to attack. And then of course, that's where you also play your Unicorn to start taking down your opponent's bases and shields to win from there. If you want to support me and the channel even further, make sure to grab the first assembly collection on the AVAULT store right now, which has all the essential TCG accessories that you need to get started. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you next video, and this is AVAULT signing out.